Hey guys, Andrew Shrout. I'm here in the sideboard. I'm sitting with Kent Ketter. How's it going, Kent?
Good, good. Nice to see you again.
And you have shown up with Mardu.
Sure.
A little different take on Mardu than we have seen these last couple of weeks. You're playing Mardu Aggro.
Yes.
So tell me a little about this deck and how you arrived at this exact list.
So a few weeks ago in Columbus, I played Brad Nelson's, pretty much his exact Mardu 75.
Okay.
I had leaned towards the Storm Breath Dragons, big surprise. Mm-hmm. And I just kind of realized that like Seeker of the Way and some of the other, specifically Seeker, wasn't really like resonating with me in the deck. I understood it was powerful, it did good things, but I just felt like there had to be something different. I lost to, I believe it was Andy Ferguson, playing the Mardu Aggro deck with Bloodsoaked Champions.
All right.
And I was like, hey, there's definitely something there, that with Butcher. And I was lucky enough, Jerry posted a list, during his daily column.
Okay.
Had some Timorets in it, and
sure.
Just kind of ran from there.
All right.
Yeah.
So, like the kind of the headliners of this deck. 4 Bloodsoaked Champion. That's kind of the glue that holds it
together.
together.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
And then 3 Timer at the Murder King.
Yep.
So tell me a little about how those cards in particular work in this deck list and how they've been for you so far.
Absolutely. The Bloodsoaked Champions are really there to help you establish your board presence early.
Right.
A lot of your Mardu mirrors are really decided by who can present threats and then quickly destroy their opponents. I know that sounds overly simple, but that's literally what the mirror has come down to, is can I play some things, stymie what you're doing, and then just kill you before you establish your board state. Bloodsoaked Champion and Timoret, they let you do that every single time, going 1 drop, 2 drop, and then hopefully like Hoarding Outburst or Rabblemaster. That puts you extremely far ahead, and that makes all of your removal a little more powerful.
Okay. So yeah, you've got the low curve to begin with, and then you've kind of got like a token sub-theme at the 3 spot for Hoarding Outbursts and then Rabble-Masters.
Absolutely. And that just lets you, the joke with my friends was Hoarding Outburst, is pretty much that and time build your own Siege Gang commander.
Right.
And it lets you establish, if the mid-range games, if your Mardu matchups, your Abzan matchups do start to elongate and get to later turns, you now have the ability to control the game outside of combat.
Right.
And that's pretty important against the Abzan deck specifically because they're playing the best removal. So if I can, pressure my opponent in a way where they now have to kill all of my tokens, it's not really realistic. And eventually Bloodsoaked Champion just starts looping.
Sure.
And you pull away that way.
Yeah, prevents them from keeping your board clean, which is kind of the
100%.
The first step in any mid-range mirror.
And kind of like a side note, but it's important because Bioblight's becoming a lot more popular. That now gives you 7 ways with Butcher and Timoret to basically make the Bioblights less,
To make the Bioblight just a 1-for-1 removal spell with one of the 3 tokens
and that's
or whatever.
perfectly fine,
Sure.
and because Hoarding Outburst is really the card that you need. That's where you pull your value out of with this deck. You've got to get your 2-for-1s off your Goblin tokens.
All right. Yeah, you mentioned Butcher the Horde, of course, that's a 4 of in a Mardu deck. Your top end basically is just big hasty flyers.
Yeah, absolutely.
4 Butchers, 1 Sarkhan the Dragon Speaker, and then 2 Storm Breath Dragon.
Yep.
Couldn't get away from it completely.
No, I had started with the original 3 Sarkhans, and the more I had messed with it, my issue with Sarkhan is if you compare Dragon attacking to Sarkhan plus 1ing, they're comparable, but I'm not really thinking that Sarkhan's that much better. And I know people, they talk about how you can play him and kill something. Many times, 5-mana removal spell, because I expect Sarkhan to die on the crackback.
Right.
I'm not that interested. A lot of decks right now, they're not well positioned to deal with Dragon.
Right.
So for once Dragon is actually good, instead of me claiming it's good and playing it anyway. There's a minimization of downfalls, and even Stoke the Flames is kind of on a downturn with the Jeskai. We'll say the Jeskai aggro deck, I think is what we're calling it. With that getting a little less popular and with Abzan kind of on the downturn, Dragon,
So you're kind of hoping to catch people with like Utter Ends or Abzan Charms.
Yeah,
like
Banishing Lights. I think a lot of people have moved away from the Banishing Lights, but it's still something that, you do get some people with those.
Okay. So we've talked a lot about the threats you're presenting. You are presenting a lot of threats that are pretty resilient. One thing that really jumped out at me with this deck is that your removal suite, it all doubles as reach.
Yes.
You have 2 Murderous Cut, and that is the only removal spell that is actually just a removal spell.
Yes.
In addition to that, you have 4 Crackling Doom, 4 Lightning Strike, 2 Magma Jet, and then 2 Stoke the Flames.
Yep. So the intent there was I wanted to take Brad's removal package that he had, and that gave you the chains, the Crackling Dooms. And I wanted to make sure I kept my actual removal numbers, because Magma Jet and Lightning Strike, while they're important, they don't kill everything.
Right.
And in the mid-range matchups, you need to be able to have your removal spells actually kill things.
Sure.
So that's why we have numbers like 2 Stokes, because it lets you close out the game, but it's actual removal.
Right.
And then Murderous Cut was the final, like I need to make sure I'm playing at least, 6 or 7 removal spells.
Sure.
So Murderous Cut got, a couple slots in there. And it's very good in this deck because you are turning over a lot more cards.
Okay.
Sometimes you have to eat a Temerate, sometimes you have to eat a Bloodsoaked Champion, but most of the time you're winning the game when you're, tossing that away to Murderous Cut.
Sure. I'll talk a little bit about the sideboard.
Sure.
So your sideboard is actually a sideboard.
Yeah.
Like an actual, some cards that come in for certain matchups, as opposed to what we have seen so far this standard season in a lot of the mid-range decks and a lot of Mardu decks and a lot of Absent decks in particular, where you kind of start aggressive and then board in a bunch of planeswalkers and maybe some sweepers and try and gear up to play the shell game of am I going to be control or aggro? But no, your sideboard is actually just answers and such. 1 Sorin Solemn Visitor, 2 Erase, 2 Magma Spray, 2 Glare of Heresy, 2 Hero's Downfall, 2 Harnessed by Force, and then 4 Thoughtseize. So tell me a little about, a lot of those cards is kind of obvious, Glare of Heresy against white decks, etc., things like that. But tell me a little about why you decided not to go to the gear up shell game.
Sure. It felt like with the way Bloodsoaked Champion, Temerate, and Hoarding Outburst were interacting in the deck, I didn't want to break up that combination when I didn't absolutely need to, and to board into that mid-range or the real control strategy that the normal Mardu decks favored. It wasn't realistic. I would basically, that's 4, 8, that's 11 cards I'd be looking to cut in some combinations.
Okay.
And it just felt like I was basically making my main deck worse by becoming a control deck. It just, the numbers didn't work out where I could cleanly transition. So I decided to just start with 4 Thoughtseize. That's a lot of effects, or that's an effect that a lot of decks had main decked.
Right.
And I chose to sideboard it, see where it got me. I'm very pleased with that. And then the 2 of splits were just with the mindset of I'm the aggro deck, I'm the beatdown. All I need to do post board is upgrade my removal slightly.
Sure.
Maybe swap my Magma Jets for Glare of Heresies appropriately and do that.
Okay.
And then I could just ride my main engine to victory.
Okay. So you're basically fine-tuning your removal suite based on what your opponent is doing.
And the sideboard's a work in progress. The downside is when I'm choosing kind of 2-ofs here and there, is I have to correctly predict the metagame.
Right.
And that's obviously difficult to do normally, but especially now when I feel like the meta in Standard is currently going through a process of decks are changing and inverting, and you see Jeskai decks now incorporating Ascendancy, but having very little to do with a combo.
Right.
You see Mardu decks just becoming control decks, and with all those different permutations, nailing the exact 6 to 7 removal spells you want in your sideboard is very difficult.
Sure, you not only have to predict what decks are going to show up at the tournament, but even within a given match, you have to predict what 60 is going to be presented when it could be radically different.
So, that's 2 layers to the shell game, and I just kind of decided I'm just going to beat some key decks, try to beat the Blue-White Heroic, try to beat the Mirror, be reasonable against Abzan, and just let everyone else, kind of jump around and see if they guess correctly.
Sure, and your main deck, of course, staying proactive the whole time.
Whole time.
Seems like a good place to be. I know I'm a big fan of attacking with little guys, and I think you probably are too. So you're off to a 2-1 start so far in this tournament. We'll be rooting for you.
Yeah, thank you.
Stick around. We've got plenty more coverage coming of the Standard Open here in Richmond.